Welcome to Jaleo. Robots are a key figure in science fiction, in comics, in literature, in movies, and of course in video games. Today we want to talk about the history, origins, and manifestations in different media of robots. Enjoy the watch!
In our real world, a robot is just a machine that can be programmed to do complex tasks. The machines that build cars in a factory are robots, but also that machine you use in your kitchen to cook your ratatouille. It's pretty obvious, though, that you won't think of a glorified blender when you hear the word robot. It's more likely that you think of the T-1000, the Nexus 6, or the protocol droids you were not looking for. In pop culture, and more so in science fiction, a robot is more than an obedient machine. It's a machine with some degree of intelligence, and sometimes even some self-consciousness. The word robot itself is pretty recent. It appeared for the first time on a sci-fi screenplay by Czech writer Karel Čapek called Rur, which actually goes about a factory that produces human-like creatures. They obey orders, but they don't have feelings, imagination or any instinct for self-preservation. The word was made by Karel's brother from the Czech word roboti, meaning more or less slave work. Thus, in its origin, robots are quite literally slaves of the human race. But that's nothing but a reworking of old tropes and icons. The automata and androids, mechanical creations or creatures made by humans in his own image and likeness. The automaton is the simplest version of this trope, halfway between reality and fiction. The real inventor, Jacques de Vaucanson, who was incidentally creator of the first power loom, devised also clever automata like this duck, which could flap its wings, eat and drink, or a shepherd who played a dozen different songs on its flute and drum. Legendary automata are much more interesting than their real-world counterparts. The most famous of all is the golem, which in the traditional story was created by the Rabbi Judah Loew ben Belacel to serve as protector of the Jewish ghetto of Prague. The golem was a man-shaped statue brought to life by some magical words written in it. It's a guardian of the ghetto, but also a handy messenger boy. It sweeps the streets and the synagogue and do chores for everyone. Eventually, the golem goes amok and destroys the ghetto on a rampage. In the end, the rabbi has no option but to destroy it. The android is a bit more complex as a character. Unlike the purely mechanical automata, an android does have a life of its own. It isn't a machine imitating a human being, but a mechanical person. This has been a recurring trope for thousands of years. Creating life is the ultimate taboo. By artificial means, at least. The usual way of creating life is perfectly fine. All major religions state that God, and only God, has the right to create life. There are a lot of stories which explore the consequences of defying this taboo, especially for petty reasons or personal ambition. Besides, androids are almost but not entirely human, and that's fascinating and appalling at the same time. It's something similar to the uncanny valley, the uncomfortable feeling we have when looking at a flowered 3D game model or at a robot with fake human skin and features. Androids look like a human, maybe they even have feelings and self-consciousness, and that makes us feel empathy towards them. On the other hand, their nature is different. We fear that we don't understand them, that they might be unpredictable. Robots can be stronger and more intelligent than us, and we are afraid that they might overcome us and ultimately wipe us out for good. Literature is full of examples. The best known and probably most distinguished is Frankenstein creature. Even if he's not made out of mechanical parts, the monster is obviously an android, an artificial human being. We don't exactly know how he was made, but it's stated that there was some degree of technology involved. Mary Shelley's story talks again about the consequences of hubris, the unchecked pride of those who think themselves as more than just a person. Victor Frankenstein pays dearly for his impotence and pride. But the most attractive element of this story is that the monster is a tragical figure too. A creature, forever unnamed, but with no identity, suffering horribly because of his hideous appearance and his own dreadful nature, even though he's not to blame for one or the other, and he actually never asked to be brought to this world. That was the first time that a story asked us to look at the soul of a robot. Since those proto-examples of robots, science fiction has developed this trope for decades. One of the most recurring approaches is to analyze the effect of technology over the human being, or, as I already mentioned, how technology turns against its creator. Any story about a robot going rogue or rising up is but an evolution of Goethe's story The Sorcerer's Apprentice, which you might remember from its adaptation in fantasy by Disney. The Golem falls within this category too, of course. The famous laws of robotics created by Isaac Asimov are one of the answers to the classic question of how the hell can we control all these animated pieces of junk so they don't wipe us out for good? Just as a reminder, the 3 laws of robotics are 3 simple orders supposedly built into the minds of all robots to serve as a moral imperative that they have to obey no matter what. They go like this. First, a robot may not injure a human being or through inaction allow a human being to come to harm. 2. A robot must obey the orders given to it by human beings except where such orders would conflict with the first law. And 3. A robot must protect its own existence as long as such protection does not conflict with the first or second laws. That is, protect humans, obey others, and protect yourself. These laws are sort of a standard for what an ethical code for robots should be, and not only in sci-fi, but in the real world too. But just as with any other law, it is subject to interpretation and exceptions, and even with them there will be conflicts and accidents. Many of the stories about robots rising up against their masters and even taking their place as the dominant race on Earth take place while exploring the consequences of these conflicts and accidents, or the consequences of not having such laws for a start. In The Matrix, robots enslave humans and farm them for energy production. The whole Terminator franchise introduces us to a similar future, where humans are lost in their war against their former machine servants. Finding examples of this kind of story is easy. Games such as Binary Domain or Snatcher show us a conflict between androids and humans. The recent Horizon Zero Dawn gives an interesting twist to that plot. Its androids are not humans, but animals. They rule the world, but in a mindless manner, as dinosaurs did eons ago. And if we stretch the definition of robot just a little bit, so it includes artificial intelligences, we have to mention GLaDOS and Shodan from Portal and System Shock, obviously inspired by the unsettling HAL 9000 from 2001 Space Odyssey. But the violent rogue is just one of the many roles robots play in science fiction stories. There's also the faithful servant, programmed to be absolutely loyal to its master, in what is just an evolution from its original role as slave machines. C-3PO and R2-D2 from Star Wars, or the companion robots in Fallout such as Godworth, are perfect examples of that. Funny enough, the audience used to love these robot servants, even if their loyalty is just a product of a programming they cannot escape. Very often, they are used to highlight humans' evil impulses. We find these machines to be more benevolent and trustworthy than our fellow humans, even though they are just obeying orders they cannot ignore, like a vacuum cleaners with aspirations. It's rather more interesting someone like Marvin, the depressed and caustic robot in The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, who only obeys orders reluctantly and grunting and complaining all along the way. On the opposite side of the spectrum, we have super war machines like the mechas. Obviously, this trope is not exactly the most complex out there, and subtleties like the laws of robotics don't stand a chance against a 30 meters high robot with missiles in his fists. The only nuanced thing said here is about the ingenuity shown by human beings when looking for new creative ways of killing each other. Sometimes, mechas are an extension of their pilots, and sometimes they have a personality of sorts. Evangelion is one of the few examples where mechas are something more than a giant killing machine.
There are many games with mechas.
Mech Warrior, Xenogear, Xenoblade, of course, Metal Gear, Titanfall. But let's stop here for a minute because these war machines are the closest thing we have to real world. Is all of this even possible? Will mechas fight the wars of the future? History has shown us more than once that if something is possible, someone will do it. So the debate is not ethical but technical. To learn more about this, we have talked with David Santo, PhD in software engineering, graduate in industrial engineering, associate professor in the University of Málaga with wide experience in robotics and development of artificial intelligences, and who happens to be...
En principio, Mazinger Z, no. Eso no lo tenemos de momento por una serie de problemas. Si estamos más cerca, o sí, en teoría, se tiene casi todo el problema resuelto para lo que son robots más chiquititos, un poco más grande que un humano, a lo sumo 1,5 veces el tamaño de un humano, con un pequeño problema que es el de la energía. Más energía supone más peso, más masa que tenga el robot, más energía que hace falta todavía para moverlo. Hasta que no encontremos la tecnología apropiada o para almacenar energía o una tecnología que permita mover los actuadores con menos energía todavía, no podremos resolver ese problema. El resto de las cosas ya están resueltas.
Now that we can sleep better knowing that no evil supervillain can rise a robot army for lack of a big enough battery, let's talk about the final and most interesting topic. Those stories that use the robot to think of what it means to be human. When a writer casts robots as enemies, they have the same creative advantage than zombies or monsters. Since by definition they are not humans, you can kill them by the thousands on screen and no one will feel especially uncomfortable. But what happens when you find out that they are actually more human than you thought? What happens when a machine strives to be something more than just a machine, when it considers itself a person? The ethical conundrums that these questions arise are almost a subgenre by themselves. Blade Runner is the most brilliant and best-known example of this trope. The replicants, the special kind of robots featured in the movie and the original novel it's based on, were created as a slave labor for hard and dangerous work in faraway space colonies. The most recent model, the Nexus 6, is more intelligent, stronger and faster than any human being. For that same reason, they can't go to Earth, under penalty of death. Blade Runner faces some of the moral dilemmas derived from creating artificial life. Is it ethical to make an intelligent creature with a short lifespan by design? And what about using them as slaves and hunting them down as animals when they refuse to accept these conditions? But above all, it talks about what makes us humans. Is how we are created what makes us human then, and not how we actually are? If replicants have self-consciousness, intelligence, imagination, feelings, are they not humans just because they were born through a different process? And if feelings and memories are not enough to make you a human because they can be created in a lab, how can we be sure about what we are? Fallout 4 introduces the player to a very similar situation through the Institute and its synths, robots who are indistinguishable from humans to the eye. The same scenario can be found in the Snatcher and Binary Domain, and of course the Blade Runner game made by Westwood Studios back in 1997. All these games talk about similar topics and face similar dilemmas, and in every single one of them we live an emotional trip not unlike the one we lived with Shelley's Frankenstein. At first, we fear and loathe the monster, but in the end we pity it when we discover that we are not that different.
Thanks for watching, we hope you enjoyed the video. If you did like it, please subscribe and share it with your friends. See you in the next video here in Jaleo. Bye bye!